Secrets hidden in national monuments. The Lincoln Memorial was unveiled on May 30th, 1922. It was created to honor the memory of the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. This monument hides two secrets. The first is a spelling error that can be seen in the inscriptions on the north wall. If you look closely at the word future, you can see a smudge on the letter F because the sculptor accidentally put an E instead of an F. The second is that underneath there's a huge basement full of stalagmites and graffiti from 1914. The Washington Monument is a popular place for tourists who go to see the capital of the United States. But something that not a lot of people know is that there's a small replica close to the real one. While the real monument measures 169 meters, the replica is only 3.6 meters. The name of the replica is Benchmark A and was created to be a geodetic control point for surveyors to ensure that maps are as accurate as possible. This 5-year-old girl disappeared every night until her father followed her to this house. It took 4 days for Tom, who's Annie's father, to realize that she wasn't in her room or in the backyard where she always played. When the girl finally showed up, he asked where she was, but she didn't say a word. On the 5th day, Tom decides to follow her without her noticing, but he loses sight of her. On the 6th day, he tries again and this time manages to follow her to her grandparents' abandoned house. He stayed hidden while he watched his daughter greet a female stranger. He then waits for his daughter to leave, then walks up to the stranger and questions her. She was an 80-year-old lady named Linda who ran away from her nursing home because she didn't want to live there. So she wandered the streets with dogs that she adopted until she met the girl who provided her with shelter and met her every day at the same time to give her food. Eventually, Annie's parents gave the house to Linda and later with the help of donations turned it into an animal shelter. Secret rooms that people found in their house. Ohio University students thought their house was haunted because their closets kept opening and they were hearing noises. After looking around, they found a room in their basement that led to a secret closet. They found a bed, books, and photographs that belonged to a stranger that was living there that they didn't know. A Reddit user shared a picture of a passageway in their new house. When he entered, he found a locked door that led to a secret room. Inside, he found a briefcase and a safe that had money, watches, and the most terrifying thing was a videotape saying the words "no, no, no." The tape was turned over to the police to try and solve the mystery. Finally, a man noticed some unusual boards in his basement, so he tried moving them and he found a room in his house that he had no clue existed. Inside, it was filled with ammunition and empty gun cases. There was even a grenade, but it was thankfully confirmed to be a dud. Dark secrets that zoos don't want you to know. Zoo pens are a possible source of salmonella, E. coli, and many other diseases, so be careful when touching the animals. Some animals can suffer from zoonosis, which they get from being held in a zoo that causes them to tick, groom excessively, and make them anxious. And to control it, they give them medication. When zoos have too many animals in very little space, they give them pills to prevent them from having babies, or they sacrifice them at birth. The food given to animals isn't always the best. In many cases, they're given processed foods, and animals like tigers who only eat meat develop dental problems and become anxious because they can't hunt. Finally, it's 50 times more expensive to keep an elephant in a zoo than to let it run free. The scariest booby traps in the world. Punji sticks were one of the most famous booby traps used in the Vietnam War. It was made out of bamboo sticks with a sharp point at the end, which were placed in deep holes that they camouflaged so nobody could see them. The goal is that the enemy would fall into the pit and the punji sticks would pierce them. Cartridge traps, also known as toe poppers, were bullet cartridges that were placed inside a bamboo tube and a nail which they camouflaged into the ground with the tip protruding. When stepped on, the pressure of the bullet caused it to fall on the nail, igniting the primer and exploding. Finally, when the Germans were retreating from the cities of Europe, they made sure to place expensive works of art with explosives that would go off with the slightest movement. The trick was to leave the paintings slightly tilted so that when they were straightened, they would explode. Prisoners who escaped prison and were never found. Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris are the only 3 prisoners who managed to escape Alcatraz prison in 1962. Because the prison is on an island, they probably died in the icy waters of San Francisco, but their bodies were never found. Sharon Kin murdered 3 people and was sentenced to life imprisonment in the 1960s. After 13 years in a Mexican prison, she managed to escape thanks to a blackout. To this day, her arrest warrant is one of the longest in US history. John Patrick Hannon and Gwyneth Thomas escaped from the Verne prison in England. They used several knotted sheets to climb over a wall, and within a few hours, Thomas was captured. But Hannon has been free for 66 years and is considered one of the most successful escapees. 5 animals that can kill themselves. Sometimes the horns of rams and goats grow so curved and big that they penetrate their skull, causing their death. Horses and donkeys can suffer from abnormal growth in their hooves. If their hooves aren't trimmed, they can no longer walk because of the pain, causing them to die from starvation. When turtles fall on their back, it's really hard for them to roll back over. When this happens, they usually die from too much sun, starvation, or attacks from another animal. During mating season, deers get into such aggressive fights with each other that their antlers get stuck together to the point where they can't be untied. When this happens and no one can separate them, the deer die because they're unable to eat. Finally, the deer pig is famous for its 2 upper tusks. The growth becomes so uncontrollable that it pierces the upper part of their jaw, and in some cases when they're really big, they could pierce their skull, causing their death. Mysterious photos that can't be explained. In this photo, if you look behind this man's head, you can see a shadow behind him. The face of the shadow belongs to Air Force pilot Freddie Jackson, who had passed away and his funeral had taken place a few hours before. In this photo of students, you can see a hand that doesn't belong to any one of them, and although they thought it was a joke, many people think it was paranormal activity. This photo was taken on a bridge in Oakville, Kentucky. Kentucky. The shadow appears to be of a woman walking, and coincidentally, there's a story that a soldier murdered his wife and child near this location. After a family dinner, Mr. Cooper took this picture to remember, but when they looked at it, they seen a strange figure hanging from their ceiling. People who had one job but still failed. This person put up a sign saying give cyclists space, but it blocks off the bike lane. This person gave the baker a flash drive with the picture they wanted on the cake, but instead the baker put a picture of the flash drive. On the news, they were supposed to blur out the people in the background's faces, but you could still see them perfectly fine in the mirror. This person's job is to cut the grass, but they're too lazy to move the pylon. Now before I show you the most funniest one, I found an app that scans your palm and tells you your future. Just press the button on my profile to get it. Finally, this person put a drain in the only spot that doesn't get water, so I guess it's working, right? Homeowners who spent a fortune just for revenge. A couple that was in the process of a divorce in the 1920s made an agreement where the husband had to build a house for her that was identical to the house they were living in, but she didn't specify the place where she wanted it. So the man had it built in a saltwater marsh that was in the middle of nowhere. In a Seattle neighborhood, neighbors got into an argument about a small plot of land. The owner of the land was approached by his neighbor, who offered him a small amount of money for the land so he could grow a garden. For some reason, the landowner was so offended that he built a house. In the end, the neighbor moved because the house obstructed his view. In Argentina, Karina Cavana was rejected from her partner's mother, so in revenge she set out to build a house that would obstruct the view of the Basilica of the Blessed Sacrament from the home of the family that rejected her. 5 things you eat that are a lie. Fruit Loops don't have any different flavors. They all taste the same, the only thing that changes is the color. Fortune cookies aren't originally from China. They were created in the United States by a Japanese man named Makoto Hagiwara, but lots of people still argue that he didn't make them. The crab meat you find in sushi is actually an imitation. It's made with finely ground white fish that's shaped, colored, and flavored to look like a crab. Pringles potato chips aren't only made of potatoes. They actually contain less than 50%, and the rest is made up with flour and cornstarch. Finally, the double stuffed Oreo cookies aren't actually double stuffed. They only have 1.92% more filling than the original cookie. 3 people who beat the system. A lady from Vancouver spotted her stolen bike for sale online. She phoned the police, but they were busy that day and couldn't help her. So she decided to call the thief and say she was interested in buying the bike. They met at McDonald's and she immediately knew that it was hers. So she asked to try it out and he agreed, and she never came back. Kimberly Oakley left a note for her son Jason saying, "Can you hang this out please?" But she didn't specify what this meant. So Jason took her words more serious than she thought he would and literally hung up the note and sent her this picture. Now before I tell you about the smartest kid, I found an app that gives you these secret emojis and also a bunch of cool fonts. Just press a button on my profile to get it. Finally, this kid's mom has simple rules. No food in the living room and no technology in the kitchen. So the boy beat the system by laying in between the two. The most painful things humans can experience. Childbirth is one of the most intense and painful things a woman can experience. This is due to the pain caused by the contraction of muscles and the pressure caused by the fetus. Women who have gone through this say it feels like very intense cramping. Kidney stones can be caused by drinking too little water, exercising too much or too little, obesity, weight loss surgery, or eating foods with too much salt or sugar. The stones are made of minerals and salts that form in your kidneys. Kidney stones start to hurt when it blocks your urine from traveling to your bladder from your kidneys. Of all the types of headaches, cluster headache is the worst. Only 1% of the world suffers from them, and the people who have experienced it say it's a piercing, sudden, and intense pain. Finally, shingles is a viral infection that causes burning in your skin that appears as blisters, which contain pus or blood. Facts you think are lies but are actually true. The Italian term spaghetti, used to name a type of pasta, is plural, and if you want to refer to a single piece of pasta in a package, the correct term is spaghettio. Columbus Day is celebrated in the United States on the second Monday of October, but the truth is Columbus never set foot in the United States. Man stepped on the moon before wheeled suitcases were made. Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in 1969, and suitcases with wheels were created in 1972. Clouds in the sky may look really light, but depending on the size, they weigh about a ton. The military uses dogs to detect bombs, thanks to their scenting abilities, which is really useful for ground operations. But what many people don't know is that the Navy trains and uses dolphins to detect bombs at sea and even attack enemy ships. Miracles people claim to have caught on tape. On Route 385 in Memphis, Tennessee, a driver lost control of his Jeep and went off the road. The car was immediately engulfed with flames. The driver escaped unharmed, but the curious thing is the police found a Bible that was untouched by the fire. It was perfectly fine even though the car was almost in ashes. In the Philippines, a little girl woke up at her funeral. Apparently she was ill and had a high fever which caused her to go into a coma, but the doctors didn't know that and declared her dead the day before her funeral. But luckily her relatives found out in time. Prahlad Yani was a Hindu ascetic who claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in over 70 years. Specialists in the scientific department put him in hospital for 15 days under 24-hour supervision and claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in those 15 days. According to the man, this can be achieved by meditation and a divine blessing. Gadgets that give you superpowers. MYO is a bracelet made by Telmic Labs. It allows you to control your electronics with simple gestures. The sensors detect the movements in your arm muscles, and some of its functions are you can control the volume of your music, you can control drones, and you could also play games without the joystick. If you've ever wanted to throw fire with your hands, you can with the Pyro Mini Flamethrower. You put it on your wrist and it lets you throw sparks, flames, and fireballs. It does this by quickly burning tissue. The exoskeleton is a full bodysuit. It has integrated weapons, it's bulletproof, it increases your mobility and strength by taking the stress off your joints and muscles, which even allows people in wheelchairs to stand up and walk. 3 people who beat the system part 2. A man from Turkey was banned from his hometown soccer stadium for a year, but he said there was a match that was really important, so he had to go to the police station to sign a paper to